This power cannot be revoked. At the first sign of violence, they act automatically against the aggressor.
The year is 1951, and a flying saucer lands in Washington, D.C. in broad daylight. Not in some remote desert or lonely farmhouse, right in the middle of the nation's capital where everyone can see it. A humanoid alien named Klaatu steps out, says he comes in peace, and immediately gets shot by a terrified soldier. Welcome to Earth, where we shoot first and ask questions never. 20th Century Fox gambled $1.2 million on a science fiction film with zero monsters, no romance subplot, and a moral message that basically called humanity a bunch of violent idiots who couldn't be trusted with atomic weapons. This was 1951, the height of Cold War paranoia, when anyone questioning military strength was labeled a communist. And here's a movie suggesting that aliens might have to destroy Earth because we're too dangerous to exist. Director Robert Wise didn't want to make another bug-eyed monster movie. He wanted to make a film that would make audiences uncomfortable, force them to look in the mirror, and ask whether we deserve to survive our own stupidity. The Day the Earth Stood Still wasn't entertainment.
Imre Klaatu, Narawak.
It was a warning shot disguised as a science fiction picture. When Klaatu walks among humans trying to understand why we can't stop killing each other, the film does something radical. It makes the alien the only rational being in the entire movie. Everyone else, military generals, politicians, journalists, ordinary citizens, reacts with fear, violence, and paranoia. The movie that dared to suggest humans were the real monsters became the most important science fiction film ever made by trusting audiences to handle the truth. Producer Julian Blaustein walked into Darryl F. Zanuck's office with the craziest pitch 20th Century Fox had ever heard. Let's make a science fiction film where the alien is right and humanity is wrong. No love story, no happy ending where Americans save the world, no reassurance that everything will work out fine. Just a cold, hard look at whether our species deserves to survive. Zanuck should have laughed him out of the room. This was 1950, and every science fiction movie followed the same formula. Monsters attack, military fights back, America wins. Audiences wanted comfort, not confrontation. They wanted to feel safe, not questioned. But Blaustein had a secret weapon, a short story called Farewell to the Master by Harry Bates that treated alien contact seriously instead of like a carnival sideshow. The story suggested that maybe, just maybe, beings from another world wouldn't be invaders but observers. And what they'd observe about humanity wouldn't be pretty. Screenwriter Edmund H. North took that concept and turned it into something even more dangerous. His Klaatu wasn't a conqueror or a savior. He was an inspector checking whether Earth's violent, atomic weapon-wielding civilization posed a threat to galactic peace. The answer? Probably yes. This was insane timing. Senator Joseph McCarthy was destroying careers by accusing people of communist sympathies. The Korean War had just started. Nuclear weapons testing was happening regularly. Any movie questioning American military policy or suggesting we might not be the good guys risked being labeled enemy propaganda. North's script went further. It made Klaatu basically space Jesus. He takes the name Mr. Carpenter, gets killed by fearful humans, and comes back to life to deliver a sermon about peace. If you missed the religious allegory, you weren't paying attention. The alien savior dies for humanity's sins and resurrects to give us one last chance at redemption. Robert Wise came aboard as director because he understood that treating this material seriously required restraint. No bug-eyed monsters, no death rays vaporizing cities, no hysterical women screaming at every shadow. Just calm, measured storytelling that let the ideas speak for themselves. By late 1951, they were filming in Washington, D.C. with actual government locations, making a movie that suggested those same government institutions might be leading humanity toward extinction. Sometimes the most radical films are the ones that look most normal. Human finding an actor to play a space alien who had to seem more human than the actual humans was nearly impossible. The role required someone with natural dignity, intelligence that didn't feel forced, and the ability to deliver lines about atomic weapons and planetary federation without sounding ridiculous. Michael Rennie got the part because he had a face that looked simultaneously familiar and alien. Tall, calm, with a measured speaking voice that commanded attention without shouting. Rennie's Klaatu felt like a disappointed teacher dealing with unruly children. When he tells humanity, "I'm impatient with stupidity," you believe him completely. The genius of Rennie's performance was making Klaatu's frustration feel earned rather than superior. He's not looking down on humans from some position of alien arrogance. He's genuinely confused about why intelligent beings would constantly prepare for mutual destruction. His disappointment feels like grief. Patricia Neal played Helen Benson, the war widow who befriends Klaatu when he's hiding among humans as Mr. Carpenter. Neal brought quiet strength to a character who could have been just the obligatory female role. Helen is smart enough to recognize that Klaatu might be right about humanity, brave enough to help him despite the danger, and realistic enough to be terrified of what he represents. The supporting cast featured character actors who made Washington, D.C. feel authentically populated. Hugh Marlowe as Helen's boyfriend Tom represented typical human response: immediate suspicion, need to inform authorities, inability to consider that maybe the alien visitor deserved to be heard. Sam Jaffe as the brilliant scientist, Professor Barnhart, was the only human besides Helen who understood what was at stake. But the real star was Gort, the 8-foot robot who accompanies Klaatu and serves as the ultimate deterrent. Locke Martin, a 7-foot 7-inch usher at Grauman's Chinese Theater, wore the robot suit and became the most memorable element of the entire film. Gort never speaks, barely moves, but radiates menace through pure presence. The relationship between Klaatu and Gort established the template for every alien and their powerful enforcer dynamic in science fiction. Gort isn't just a weapon, he's a reminder that Klaatu's peaceful message has teeth. The calm alien and his silent, potentially devastating robot companion created tension that no amount of special effects could match. The Day the Earth Stood Still had a tiny effects budget compared to most science fiction films, so Robert Wise made a radical choice: show less, suggest more, and trust the audience's imagination. The flying saucer lands in broad daylight on the National Mall, one of the boldest opening sequences in genre history, but we never see it actually flying, just sitting there, impossible and undeniable. The saucer design itself was revolutionary in its simplicity. No rockets, no flames, no visible propulsion, just a smooth, seamless disc that looked like it came from a civilization beyond our understanding of physics. Art director Lyle Wheeler and his team created something that didn't look like technology we could almost understand, but technology we couldn't understand at all. Gort was achieved through costume and camera tricks rather than elaborate mechanics. Locke Martin could barely see inside the suit, which actually helped. His careful, deliberate movements made Gort seem even more inhuman and threatening. The visor that opened to reveal his disintegration ray was a simple effect, but the slow, mechanical precision of it created genuine dread. The most famous sequence, Klaatu shutting down all electrical power on Earth for exactly 30 minutes, required almost no special effects at all. Just shots of cities going dark, machines stopping, silence falling. The power wasn't in showing spectacular destruction, but in demonstrating how easily an advanced civilization could paralyze ours without firing a shot. Bernard Herrmann's music score did more to create atmosphere than any visual effects could manage. Instead of typical orchestral drama, Herrmann used two theremins, electronic instruments that created otherworldly sounds never heard in cinema before. The eerie, wavering tones made everything feel genuinely alien without needing to show anything unusual on screen. The decision to film on location in Washington, D.C. gave the movie authenticity that studio sets could never match. When the saucer sits on the actual National Mall with real government buildings in the background, audiences couldn't dismiss it as fantasy. This was happening in their world, their city, their reality. Wise understood that the most effective science fiction doesn't try to show you everything. It shows you just enough to make your imagination fill in the terrifying details. The threat of what Gort could do mattered more than seeing him actually do it. The implications of Klaatu's message resonated more than any action sequence could. The Day the Earth Stood Still premiered in September 1951 to an America that was absolutely not ready to be told it might be the bad guys. The Korean War was intensifying, nuclear testing was accelerating, and questioning military policy could get you investigated by the House Un-American Activities Committee. And here's this movie suggesting that humanity's violence and nuclear weapons made us a threat that might need to be eliminated for the greater good of the universe. Klaatu's final speech wasn't subtle. Join the galactic community and live in peace, or continue developing weapons and be destroyed. Those were the options, and neither involved America being special or exceptional. Critics were confused about how to respond. The New York Times praised the film's intelligence while seeming uncomfortable with its implications. Bosley Crowther wrote that it was surprisingly clever, but questioned whether audiences would accept a story where the alien was clearly more evolved than humanity. The answer was, barely. Religious groups had mixed reactions to the Christ-like allegory. Some appreciated the moral messaging about peace. Others were disturbed by comparing an alien to Jesus, complete with death and resurrection. The name Mr. Carpenter wasn't exactly subtle, and having him literally die and return to deliver a final sermon pushed boundaries that made church groups nervous. The FBI actually monitored the film's production, concerned about its anti-military stance and what they saw as leftist messaging. In their view, any movie suggesting that American military might wasn't the solution to every problem was potentially communist propaganda. The fact that the film resonated with audiences despite this paranoia showed how desperate people were for alternatives to constant war preparation. Box office was solid but not spectacular, $1.85 million against the $1.2 million budget. Enough to be profitable, but not the blockbuster Fox hoped for. Audiences came because it was science fiction, stayed for the spectacle, but left feeling unsettled by the message. That discomfort was exactly what Robert Wise intended. The film's impact grew over time as more people recognized what it was actually saying. This wasn't a monster movie or an invasion story. It was a meditation on whether humanity deserved to survive its own worst instincts. Klaatu's warning that Earth would be destroyed if we didn't change our ways felt less like science fiction and more like prophecy. Every intelligent science fiction film made after 1951 exists, because The Day the Earth Stood Still proved you could treat genre material with respect and audiences would respond. Star Trek's entire philosophy of peaceful exploration and first contact protocols came directly from this movie's DNA. Close Encounters of the Third Kind's benevolent aliens, E.T.'s message of understanding instead of fear, Arrival's focus on communication over combat, all of them descend from what Robert Wise achieved. The film established that science fiction could be a vehicle for social commentary rather than just escapist entertainment. When Rod Serling created The Twilight Zone, he was following the template The Day the Earth Stood Still laid out. Use fantastic situations to examine human behavior, force audiences to question their assumptions, and trust viewers to handle uncomfortable truths. Gort became the template for every powerful robot in cinema. The Terminator's unstoppable nature, RoboCop's program directives, even Marvel's vision. They all trace back to the silent, menacing robot who could destroy civilization but chose restraint. The phrase Klaatu Barada Nikto entered pop culture as shorthand for commands that prevent catastrophe. Most importantly, the film demonstrated that the most effective alien contact stories aren't about aliens at all. They're about humanity looking at itself through outsider eyes. When Klaatu walks among us trying to understand our violence and irrationality, he's forcing audiences to see ourselves the way another species might. As brilliant but dangerously immature beings playing with weapons we're not mature enough to control. The movie's warning about nuclear weapons became more relevant with every passing decade, as the Cold War intensified, as more nations developed atomic arsenals, as the threat of annihilation grew more real. Klaatu's ultimatum stopped feeling like science fiction and started feeling like a documentary from the future, warning about our present. Today, with climate change, artificial intelligence, and continued nuclear proliferation, the day the Earth stood still remains uncomfortably current. We're still the species that shoots visitors bringing warnings, still prioritizing short-term national interests over long-term survival, still unable to cooperate even when faced with existential threats. The film that dared to suggest humans might not deserve to survive unless we changed became the film that keeps asking whether we ever actually changed at all. Sometimes the most important movies are the ones that remain warnings instead of becoming history. So, was The Day the Earth Stood Still too honest about humanity's flaws, or exactly the wake-up call we needed but ignored? What's your favorite film that trusted audiences to handle uncomfortable truths? Share your thoughts below and subscribe for more stories about movies that dared to tell us what we didn't want to hear.